Enda Coll, good morning to you.
Adrian, how are you?
We booked this lot yesterday. I wasn't expecting almost either of you to turn up on the basis of that shambles last night.
I wouldn't exactly call it a shambles.
A delight to watch for the neutral, right? But I definitely did think of the two of you last night, and with this item in mind, that it's tough watch. Or I mean, are you still taking into the this is a progressive plan in place, and look, we're the wrong side of a 7-goal thriller, but we're nearly there? Or what are you thinking?
Yeah, well, I actually I was recording Team 33 during it, and when I started the recording, Celtic were 2-0 up. By the end of it, they were 4-2 down, 4-3 in the end. If you had told me at this stage last night, with Celtic going into that game without their main striker, without their main midfielder, with a back four that has only played together once before this, and came out against Real Betis, who have bought one of Arsenal's players, where Celtic are selling players to Arsenal, I would have said 4-3 is a good result. The more annoying part about it is that it's another European result for Celtic, where they take the initiative from the start, they go ahead, and then they just can't hold on to the result in the end. So it is frustrating, but considering the squad depth at the minute and the starting lineup the Celtic went out in that pitch with to boss the game for the first 25 minutes, and I think they did. I don't think it's unfair to say that. To boss it in the way that they did, to take the initiative, I think there's loads of positives in it. But again, the result is what matters. So I can see why people would be disappointed, but ultimately I think it's a decent result, and it's positivity going into the next game, because if Celtic have the likes of Kyogo Furuhashi coming back into that team, Cal McGregor, their captain, coming into the midfield, I'd fancy Celtic to beat Real Betis at Celtic Park. So I come out of really positive, actually, in spite of the defeat.
Aisling, it sounds like, and you're nodding, you're in the same boat.
Absolutely. Like I said it here in the house before the game, like, would we take a draw? And my boyfriend Colin, now he's a big Celtic fan too, you know, he said absolutely, like, look, there's 6-7 injuries here that you know, are costly, so we didn't know what way they set up, as Enda said. So yeah, I definitely think in the first 25 minutes they were really impressive. They just went out with this full energy, you know, the tempo was brilliant to see, and they had the chances, and that was probably the only annoying part, because they could have went 3-0 up. Jota had a chance, but it just got away in him, but he did a super game as well, and he's only someone we're starting to see more from as well. So there's loads of positives to take from it, and the new manager, like, I think it's growing, it's developing, something's happening. It's better to be a Celtic supporter this season around, that's for sure. And I think that's what you get from the fans as well. Like, you know, they're happy with how things are going. Yes, of course you want to get that result, but as Enda said, I think you know, in the second leg that we can get over them.
Yeah, like conceding 4 against a mid-table Liga team, and I know that, Enda, you're saying that they've sort of, you know, they've dipped into the market obviously in a significant way. Is this similar to the Liverpool conversation we were having with Mark Lawrenson earlier on, that once Van Dijk is back, all this gets fixed, that once all the players are fit and ready, that's a pretty solid unit? Or what's the sense? 4 against Betis is not great.
No, well, you see, the issue is that there's not much more to come back into this team, Adrian. As I said, Cal McGregor comes back into midfield, and Kyogo Furuhashi comes up front. But Celtic bought 11 players in the transfer window, and they're still incredibly short in major positions. It was just a major upheaval of the entire squad. Loads of good players leaving. Edouard going to Crystal Palace. You know, the likes of Ryan Christie going to Bournemouth was disappointing for the club to lose a player like that. Loads of loanees over the last couple of years. So this is a sort of a culmination of bad management from board level over the last couple of years. The Celtic are in this position. They only really have 2 main strikers that they trust. They only really have 2 wingers on each side. So if one gets injured, like last night, you're left with one person. The likes of Adam Montgomery is a young player coming through. He's a left back. He was playing left wing last night because Celtic's main left winger is out injured. Midfield is a serious issue. The likes of Cal McGregor's out injured. Ismail Asoro started in centre defensive midfield because apparently James McCarthy has COVID. Packy Boner let that slip last night in the match coverage. That wasn't actually reported before that. But basically, they're working off 2 players in each position right now. And for a season that you're playing Europa League football and the Scottish League is condensed as it is, it's not a great situation going into the season. And it actually reminds me very much of the FAI in a way, the way that Celtic has been run. Loads of old white men in suits at board level, one in particular with far too much power. and it's just been a mess over the last couple of years. So it's going to take more than Ange Postecoglou to change this. And by the looks of it, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen maybe over the next couple of years. Don Mackay, the new CEO, stepped down last week after 3 months in charge. And there's loads of different angles to that story in terms of who said what, who did what. Celtic are putting it down to inexperience. He's deleted everything about Celtic off his LinkedIn, off his Twitter. Everything is gone. So it was not a good separation by the club, and that is a worrying sign for me.
Yeah, and even that notwithstanding, right, and like that, a fairly big one to be notwithstanding, but even that notwithstanding, like it's difficult. You mentioned Edouard earlier on. Like you look at Jota last night, it struck me as he was like a Sterling-esque almost in terms of his stature and his movement. Incredible looking player. And Edouard comes in last week, comes off the bench, and he scored with his first touch, 2 goals. Suddenly at a club like Palace, now look at it, he's 1 game in, maybe he scores 8 goals over the course of the season, I don't know, but possibly he goes on to score a lot more than that, and maybe he attracts a bigger name. Jota has a brilliant season, and suddenly there's other clubs coming in for the men. Like that's going to be, it's not, I think it's always been an issue for Scottish clubs, but it feels particularly a big issue at the minute that, you know, those bigger names that are coming through, and you've mentioned some of them already, they're going to get fished out by the bigger clubs in England and elsewhere, and it's hard to create a sustainable model when that's always the case in the background.
Yeah, exactly. And this year was supposed to be the quote-unquote rebuild. So Celtic were supposed to bring in a director of football. That never happened. They were supposed to overhaul their scouting network. That never happened. Don Mackay came in as a new CEO, but now he's gone. And you're wondering who is doing the building of this. Because, I mean, Edouard is a prime example. Edouard went for roughly, give or take, 15 million. Edouard's a 25 million euro or pound player. But the reason he went for 15 million was because Celtic held on to him until he had 1 year left on his contract. Similar enough, you know, Kieran Tierney, they actually got good value for, but the likes of Mr. Dembele, who left the club a couple of years ago, exact same thing, leaving the players left with 1 year in the contract so they have all their power. It happened with Christopher Ayer as well, that went to Brentford, and they're doing themselves down a little bit because they should be getting higher fees for these players because they are better players than the clubs are paying for them. Like, Take Edouard, for example. He's going to go in and he's going to be a starter for Crystal Palace. Kieran Tierney went in and he's one of the best players at Arsenal. Virgil van Dijk went to Southampton and now he's the best defensive player in the world. You know, the Scottish League has a lot of talent, but the management of it does itself down a little bit. It sells itself short time after time after time. And if Celtic do want to be this sustainable model where they develop talent and sell them on, which that's what they are eventually, like that's what they're supposed to be, they need to have players coming in like a conveyor belt, and that is just not happening at the minute. You should not have to bring in 11 players in a transfer window and then still be short. You should already have those players in. You should have 3 or 4 players at your disposal if you're supposed to be a developing club. And Celtic do everything in their power to try show this image that they are a development club without actually doing what is necessary to be that type of club.
25 million doesn't necessarily make Edouard a top 4 player, but do you think that's where he ends up? Is he that good?
I don't necessarily feel he will be a top 6 player in the Premier League, but I do think he will eventually get a move to a club in Europe, perhaps a Lyon stature, maybe a little bit higher somewhere. It might not be France, it might be Germany, might be Premier League. I do think he's definitely good enough at the minute to be a top half striker. I'm not sure Crystal Palace what they're going to do once Eze is back, once they have all their players fit, how Patrick Vieira's puzzle is going to come together. It could be a very exciting team or it could be a disastrous team. So I think that move will be the judge of what he really is. But I think if Moussa Dembele, who had a similar enough career to Edouard at Celtic, is an example. I mean, he went to Lyon, then he was at loan to Atletico Madrid last year, and now he's flying for Lyon again in the Champions League, or in the Europa League, sorry. And I think he's about that level. I don't know if he is the quality of striker that a Man City would be going for, or, you know, upper echelon super clubs. But I do think he is a top 6, top 8 striker, or he will get there eventually.
Right.
And just on that, like, we're looking at players of Dembele, you have Tierney, you have Edouard. They've all gone on now and obviously Edouard remains to be seen what he will do, but he started well. And like, people do talk about Scottish football, that it's not that great of a standard. Is this maybe, I don't know, sort of a proof in itself that it is worthy?
No, well, like, I think people are going to have that opinion anyway. You know, they're not going to change their opinion. It's the same as some people's opinion on the League of Ireland. They don't actually watch it, so they just decide that it's terrible. And the Scottish League is one of them, like the League of Ireland in many ways, in good ways and bad. It's one of the most entertaining leagues to watch in the world. Not for the quality of football, because outside of the top two, the quality is not there. That's something that nobody really denies. But for sheer entertainment value and the absolute nonsense that goes on off the pitch, the Scottish League is an incredibly interesting league to watch. And even for Irish players coming through, the likes of St Mirren are a really good club to watch at the minute, with Jamie McGrath developing really nicely there. And yeah, like, I just don't think people will ever give the Scottish League its fair dues. They didn't do it when Henrik Larsson and Chris Sutton were playing there. They're not going to do it when Kieran Tierney and Edouard's coming through. It's just something that's already there. It's a bit of snobbery from the Premier League, but we wouldn't expect anything else from a league with Burnley and Newcastle absolutely pulling up trees down there.
It wouldn't be Enda Coll on OTB without a bit of a jab at the rest. Good man.
Cheers, lads.